Hello and Happy New Year! Gonna start 2017 off with a follow-up on particle stops. Here we have a brand new project, and this is in response to a forum question by Tommy Etkin asking if there's a way to manually trigger a particle creation in the particle stop. I like the idea of a Python method as suggested here, but in the meanwhile, I suggested a way that you could do it with just the built-in particle stop. However, I actually hadn't tested it before I made the suggestion, but I just tested it now, and I'll show you all how it's done. So, one thing to note about the particle stop is that the birth parameter is number of particles born each second, not born at one time in a cluster. But you know what your frame rate is, and you know how many particles you want, and so if you know your frame rate, you know your frames per second, and you know how many particles you want in that frame. So we will use all that information, and hopefully it'll make more sense than I just explained it when I show you. Okay, so first let's make a simple source geometry. Got ourselves a sphere. Great. Now let's run that into a particle stop. Cool. And let's put a null on here. Put it in wireframe mode so we can see the particles a little better. Or actually, why not actually make the points show up, just for the sake of it. Not the most efficient way to display particles, but good enough for now. So as you can see, they're kind of just spawning. That's because on the particles page, we have birth set to 100, so that spawns 100 particles over the course of 1 second. If we set that to 1, it'll be 1 particle per second. One thing it's always good to do is remember to remove unused points. That can give you problems if you don't do that. So what Tommy and many of you may want is, say, a button where you hit the button and however many particles you want get spawned at that moment. They live their life and then disappear. For the sake of simplicity, or I guess to be able to see more, we'll set that to be a life expectancy of 10. For debugging purposes, let's add an info. And we only need to look at our number of points here. Great. So now, to trigger the spawning, let's just quickly add a button, pop that into momentary mode. Cool. Then let's get a trigger. And in our trigger, we will bring all of our lengths down to 0, because we only want to pulse this value for 1 frame exactly. We have to do this because you don't know if you're going to be able to actually let go of your finger on the button in exactly 1 frame. Okay, let me make sure I got all that right. Great. Put that into a null here. So if we don't do anything to it and just map that directly to our birth, kill off those particles, as you can see, we're not necessarily seeing anything happen, because right there what we're doing is telling the particle stop to spawn 1 particle over the course of a second, but we're only telling it that for 1 frame, so it might not trigger. So what we need to do is multiply our value that we're telling to be the births per second by our frame rate. An easy way to do that is using this time increment thing. Just copy that out of there, and then we can add a math chop. And I did it in the wrong spot. Should not be adding, we should be multiplying. Get rid of all those. Now you are getting 1 particle per button click. If you want to increase that, you would increase your peak level, or you could just put another math. Let's be a little fancier than that. We'll make a constant to hold the value. We'll call it maybe spawn count. How many particles should we spawn? Map that to our peak level. Maybe we want 5 per button click. If we watch that value, boom, 5 with each click. Currently they're not really randomized. We covered this in the original particle tutorial, but for the sake of it, oh, forgot. Random. Great. Say we want, I don't know, 55 per button click. Boom, boom. Go back to 1. Maybe the particles don't live as long. Great. So, there you have it. That is how you would manually spawn particles with the click of a button. Or that could be based on an incoming MIDI note from a drum machine, or listening to a microphone and anytime the volume comes over a certain peak level threshold, or whatever the heck you want. You just pulse a value into your birth parameter for a single frame, and that value should be however many particles you want times your frame rate. And that is how you would instantaneously birth or spawn however many particles you want as a cluster. Thank you very much, and this example file will be cleaned up and uploaded shortly and will be available at patreon.com/cutmon. See you soon.